I mentioned in First Light this weekend that I was recently on Yonge Street when I came across a dramatic and somewhat distressing scene that has stayed with me. Walking north near College Street, I first noticed the overwhelming smell of garlic, and then I spotted a jar of marinara sauce that had shattered rather spectacularly on the sidewalk. It was immediately clear what had happened. The plastic shopping bag that had once held the jar was ripped to shreds, and there, resting on the ground as well, splattered with sauce and the shards of glass. What really grabbed my attention, though, was what else was strewn about the scene. There on the ground was also a box of dried pasta, a baguette of some sort in a paper bag, and the ingredients for a fresh salad. All of it abandoned on the spot, though everything but the sauce seemed to still be in good shape. Clearly enough, someone's hopes of a lovely Italian dinner had not gone according to plan. But what struck me was how those hopes had seemingly been so easily dashed. In the days since, my heart has gone out to this hapless person who, by all evidence, just couldn't cope with literally picking up the pieces and making a meal with what was left. As I've reflected back on it, I've realized that this scene was a call to compassion. After all, this far into the pandemic, and now with the unknowns around the new variant of concern, the truth is that few, if any, of us have as much capacity or resilience as we once did. A dear member of the congregation reached out to me yesterday morning to say that reading my spaghetti sauce story helped her feel that she's not alone in being constantly on the verge of tears over seemingly small things, and recognizing that her energy to cope is pretty well depleted these days. Understandably so. I'm tempted to ask for a show of hands of just how many of you can relate, to ask if I can get an amen, to let her know that she is not alone in noticing this internal struggle these days. I hear a few amens. For many of us, this call to compassion needs to begin with our very selves. Even with the relative privilege of living in a country with tremendous resources, where vaccines are now plentiful and the healthcare system strong, where governments have thrown vital financial lifelines to so many to help them get through this, and where so many of us, because of the particulars of our lives, have been able to ride out this pandemic with some degree of security. We must acknowledge that this has been and remains a very hard chapter in our lives. It is blatantly obvious, but it needs to be named. We have never lived through something quite like this. Arguably, there has not been in our lifetimes an event that has so gripped the entire world at once. An event now nearing the end of its second year that has brought some degree of trauma to everyday life for most every person alive. While we here have mostly been spared the levels of suffering and loss that have been so acutely felt in other places, we are still very much living through a time that is nowhere near being normal. This already seems to be something that's easy for us to forget, even as we are dutifully putting on our masks and partaking in the many strange pandemic protocols that are quickly becoming second nature. This is a truly extraordinary time in the sense that there is little that is ordinary about it. And it is a time then for extraordinary compassion, a time to be gentle with ourselves and one another as we seek to live into our new normal. A story I share with you. It happens to be true. On June 18th, 1947, on a Pan Am flight from Calcutta to New York, an engine stopped working, which caused another engine to overheat, which caused a fire, which caused panic aboard the plane. While the pilot attempted to land the plane, the 25-year-old co-pilot unbuckled himself and went into the main cabin to help passengers. He sat next to a young woman who was alone and told her that it was going to be okay. He told her this as he watched the engine continue to burn. He told her this as he watched the flaming engine fall from the wing. He told her this as fuel lines became exposed, as fire overtook the aircraft, and as the plane pitched downward. He told her this knowing that every single person on that plane was likely about to die. Shortly thereafter, the plane crashed into the Syrian desert. 14 of the people on board did die instantly. 2 crew members survived, including the co-pilot. With a pair of broken ribs, he went back into the burning plane multiple times to pull survivors from the wreckage. The last passenger he rescued before the plane was completely engulfed in flames died in his arms. Eventually, the wind turned and fire overtook the aircraft. As the fire burned out, the small band of survivors waited alone in the overwhelming darkness of the desert night. Morning eventually arrived, but a rescue crew did not. So the co-pilot took charge and formed 2 search committees. The first went in one direction, and the other, along with the co-pilot, went in the other, wandering in the desert. Eventually, this group found a village that had a radio. A call was made, and the 22 survivors were rescued. As for the co-pilot, the crash changed him forever. After that, he did not want to be a pilot anymore. He wanted to do something different with his life. This was, after all, the 3rd plane crash that he had been in a short span of years. He probably thought, why push his luck? I mean, how many plane crashes can one reasonably expect to walk away from? So the young man resigned from Pan Am to pursue a career in writing and then ultimately in television. Those of you who are devoted fans of the original Star Trek may recognize this to be the true life story of Gene Roddenberry, the man who would go on to create the illustrious series. Long before he had conjured up Spock and Captain Kirk, Roddenberry was a pilot, first in the Army and then for Pan Am. I share this story from his background because it illustrates so well a quote most often misattributed to Winston Churchill, that if you find yourself in hell, keep going. Now, co-piloting a crashing plane has certainly got to rank up there as one of Dante's 9 circles of hell. Not only are you fearing for your own life, you're aware that you are about to be intimately involved with the potential deaths of everyone entrusted to your care and expertise. And yet, as with any given hell we might find ourselves in, the most pertinent question always centers on what we intend to do about it. The true mark of resilience is seen in someone who doesn't accept the present hell as a future they intend to live into. We see the signs of resilience in someone when they choose to pick up the pieces and to keep going. To do so requires holding forth a vision, a determination that they will get out alive. That, of course, was what Roddenberry did on that plane. On a very practical level, he moved from the cockpit to what turned out to be a much safer seat on that ill-fated flight. This gave him an obvious advantage, even if it wasn't the motivation behind his decision to move. But perhaps more important was his outward confidence that everything would be okay, that all would somehow ultimately be well. We can question whether it was morally acceptable for him to repeat such words of assurance to the woman on that plane. Arguably, it would have been more truthful to say, at the very least, I don't know what's going to happen, and it isn't looking good. I firmly believe people nearing the end of their lives have a right to know about the reality of their situation so they can make whatever decisions or take whatever final steps they need to. But I have read that one of the most significant factors in whether a person survives a plane crash or some other horrific situation often boils down to a person's conviction that whatever challenging circumstances they are in, that they won't be that person's ultimate demise. They are determined that what they are facing isn't going to be the way that their story ends. Now, it has to be said that such determination is not always enough. It certainly wasn't enough for the passengers who died. Sometimes you need luck or medicine or some sort of intervention to be able to pull through and make it out alive. But the important point here is that our attitudes can make a vital difference whenever we are trying to work our way out of some proverbial hell. And they can make the all-important difference in what's to come once we have been to hell and back. Resilience isn't just about surviving an ordeal. It is about bouncing back from it on many levels. This is where the well-worn wisdom that what doesn't kill us makes us stronger shows itself to actually be true. Recent studies have shown that we humans are more resilient than we tend to imagine or recognize. While post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, has entered our lexicon in recent decades and is used frequently to describe the profound lingering effects from trauma, the encouraging news is that more than 75% of those who experience a life-threatening or violent event emerge without a stress disorder. In fact, up to 70% of people who experience trauma go on to see positive gains as a result. So much so that this is now referred to in the psychological community as post-traumatic growth. Storytelling is essential to this type of growth. How we make sense of our story, how we make meaning of our story, how we tell that story is critical to our capacity to recover from hardship and heartache. It's critical to our capacity for resilience. As Richard Tedeschi, a major research professor in this field, puts it, trauma is a shock that ruptures the central story that you thought was your life. The recurring patterns that make up life are disrupted. The sense of safety is lost. Having faced death, people in these circumstances are forced to confront the eternal questions of life. But some people are able to write a new story. So it is that the growth comes not from the event, but from the struggle afterward to write a new story that imagines a life that is better than the one before. Researchers have found that people who thrive after a shock are able to tell clear, forward-looking stories about themselves, while those who don't thrive get stuck, ruminating darkly about the past. I've often said that there are people in this world who are in desperate need of a near-death experience. I'm joking when I say that, of course, but only to a degree. There is something about being brought up to and even pushed beyond our breaking points, being confronted by life's hard and heartbreaking twists and turns that helps us to more fully appreciate how very precious a gift it is to be alive. For better and for worse, hardship shows us something of what we are made of. We are made of bones that break, minds that can scar, flesh that can ache in agony, hearts that can be torn asunder. But we are also made of flesh and bones that can heal, hearts and minds that can mend and grow and open to hold more than we ever thought possible. In other words, the capacity of our very being to accept the bittersweet blessings of this life, the strange silver linings that so often come even from life's hardest chapters. In this life, hell comes to each of us in time and turn, if to varying degrees. When and if you find yourself there, be it a hell of your own making or a hell completely beyond your control, do all you can to keep going. Keep going to the future that is beyond the pain. Keep going to write a better end to the story that is you. Keep going, with each step blessing and calling forth the gift of life that is within. With all of the strength that you can summon, keep going.